Thank you for joining us for the New York Times Read Along. We will get going in just under a minute. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Where are you watching from? Please share. We will be starting Shree's Sunday New York Times Read Along shortly. Thank you for joining us for Shree's Sunday New York Times Read Along. Our guest this week is Amy Padnani, an editor on the New York Times Obituaries desk and creator of Overlooked, a series that tells the stories of remarkable people whose deaths were not originally reported by the New York Times. Our host, of course, is Shree Srinivasan, Marshall Loeb Professor at the Stony Brook School of Journalism and co-founder of Digimentors, a digital and virtual events consultancy. My name is Neil Parekh. I'm the executive producer of the New York Times Read Along and occasional guest host. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Please share, please like, please comment. Please tell us where you're watching from. And now, without further ado, we'll get to the Upper West Side cam to check in with Shree and see how things are going in New York. And we can tell, obviously, it's a little windy out there. And let's bring Shree on.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Neil.
Good morning.
It's a beautiful looking day here, but it's about 45 degrees Fahrenheit, 7 degrees Celsius. So I'm not going to spend as much time out here as I normally do. And you're seeing this sky. I just love this color. There's the Hudson River. There's New Jersey. There in the distance is Central Park. And you can see a quiet Manhattan morning, extra quiet because of the coronavirus.
Absolutely.
So tell us where you're watching from, folks.
We have a number of people who are joining us. Aparna is up early in Los Angeles. Good morning, Aparna. And we have Jonathan Borstein joining us from the East Village. Ted Coltman joining us here from Washington, D.C., near where I am. I'm in Springfield, Virginia. Erica Angulo, I hope I pronounced that right, joining us from Miami. And Unikrishna Damodaran from Bahrain. Truly an international show, Shree, which is always great to see.
Hello, everybody. Great to have folks here. I'm just giving you a little glimpse of the New York Times as we get ready. International audience and great group of folks. We love the New York Times Read Along family. It's been 5 years of the New York Times Read Along. And Patricia is saying hello from New York. So hi, Patricia. She wanted us, Neil, to do a 24-hour marathon for the read along. We haven't decided
ready,
whether
Shree.
We can do that.
You tell me when.
I know you are,
and I'll do it.
I know you're very capable of doing that. And our company, we should say, Neil is our VP of events and comms at Digimentors. We've been doing dozens of conferences and shows and virtual events every month since March or April. And we did a 24-hour show for an organization and to celebrate, for Education International, to celebrate World Teachers Day, and that was a lot of fun and a lot of
Yeah.
work.
The great thing about it, and the reason we were able to pull that off, is because we have a full team of people that works with us at Digimentors. Certainly we were able to work in shifts. We had about 17 people total that worked on the event from our side, which I think was just incredible. Um, but yes, as Shri has mentioned, we let us know if we can help you put an event online. Certainly, don't cancel your upcoming event. Most people now are used to meetings online, but we can. It doesn't have to be a Zoom call, as we say. We can do it much better than that. With three other people watching, Shri, before we get into the paper. Hi, Mom, one of our loyal watchers. Thanks. My mom watches every week, so really appreciate her joining from Hastings on Hudson, where I grew up. We have another early riser, Doug Levy from
Amazing.
California, which is really great. And I will. I'm trying to see. There was another person that has just joined. Um, I'm not sure. Let's see, Miriam Berkeley. There we go. Is joining from Hell's Kitchen, and J.H. Kim from Northern California.
What is with all these
Um,
Californians awake early? Maybe
I
they're
know, right?
having trouble sleeping with the elections coming up in just little over a week. I hope
That's
people who are in the U.S. have been able to vote early or send in their mail-in ballots. This is so important. Every vote counts, and not just at the top of the ticket, but all through the down the ballot as well. So everyone, please vote and please participate. Really,
uh,
really important.
absolutely. Ron Thomas is checking in from Dubai. Thank you, Ron. And Apollo is in Montclair, New Jersey, after many years in Las Vegas, right?
Yes.
And Erica says I did pronounce her name right. So that's thank you for the feedback, Erica. Diane Stefani is joining us from Margate, New Jersey. Deborah Bernick, who's cooking aloo gobi today in D.C. Our friend Mark Oppenheim, and just a number of people, and Pradnya Haldapur from Silver Spring, Maryland. So before we jump into the paper, Shri, we definitely want to thank and recognize our team. I mentioned the team that came together to do our 24-hour show, but every week we have a great team that comes together to pull off the New York Times read along. Paula Kiger, Steve Taylor, Julia Weeks, Carla Baranakis. What's special about the New York Times read along and the shows that we do, as you know, is that we have people engaging with our audience in Facebook and in LinkedIn, etc., sharing links to stories. Just being that point of contact. Too many times I've seen big brands set up a Facebook Live, set up a live stream, just pointing a camera at a panel discussion, and there's no one to provide context, links, answer questions, etc. So thank you so much for the great work that you're doing, Paula, in Facebook and Steve in LinkedIn. It really is how we've built up a community around the New York Times read along. And of course, Shri, we wouldn't be able to do what we do without our sponsors as well. So if you can talk a little bit about your work with Muckrack, that would be great.
Thank you so much to our producers, and big thank you to our sponsors. Muckrack Academy, the fundamentals of social media. It's a free on-demand certification course for anyone really in the world can take it, and it's at mrac.co/social. And more than 4,000 people have taken this course, and I hope you will take it too. It's about 2 hours of work. You can do it in 2 hours or 2 days or 2 months.
Thank you. And in addition to Muckrack, we also have a great sponsor in Strategy Focus Group. So I'll take a moment to thank Strategy Focus Group. As I said, in addition to Muckrack, Strategy Focus Group is a global team of human capital strategists committed to helping organizations solve people issues within your organization. Ron Thomas is with Strategy Focus Group. So thank you again, Ron, for your support. Um, they do that by working alongside you to solve your toughest problems and helping you capture your greatest opportunities. So if you're interested in being a sponsor, please contact Shri at Shri at digimentors.group or myself, Neil at digimentors.group. And we certainly encourage you to learn more about our sponsors. You can go to readalong.link/muckrack or readalong.link/strategy focus group to learn more. And of course, if you want to sponsor the New York Times Read Along, we have very affordable rates, and we can work with you depending on if it's a short term or long term sponsorship that you want to work on. So with that, Shri, I think that we can take a look at the New York Times and what's in the paper today.
Sure. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Please continue to tell us where you're watching from and tell us how your Sunday is going. And also, since it is our 5-year anniversary that we're celebrating all month, if you have any memories of this show that you want to mention, we'd love to hear that as well. Neil just changed the Upper West Side camera to the New York Times camera. So I will bring on Amy in just a minute, just to show everybody what's going on in the rest of the paper before we get to the front section. The cover of Sunday Review is Minority Rule. Either we become a truly multiracial democracy, or we will not be a democracy at all. Minority Rule. This is why this election is so important. The at-home section, we're searching for that glimmer of truth, and that's the situation we're in now. The kids section of the New York Times is how to become president and explaining how things work, and 5 ways the president can change your life. I think lots of people of all ages would benefit from that. Real estate, when the smoke clears, key stakeholders weigh in on how the pandemic could change New York City's housing markets, land use, and policy. The book review cover is Dark Times, 50 States of Terror, and lots of other books are on the front page here. It's also this time of the year when museums focus on this section called the Fine Arts and Exhibits section of the New York Times. When I was the chief digital officer of the Metropolitan Museum, it was very important for the Met to advertise in here and to be covered here. And museums are just starting to come back to life. This is the cover of the New York Times Style magazine. The greats, Dawood Bey is here, Sigourney Weaver, and others, Angela Davis. So this should be an interesting issue. Arts and Leisure cover is PBS at 50, Pioneering Past, Uncertain Future. And the Metropolitan section, which even if you subscribe to the paper, you may not get in other parts of the country. In 2020, are killer clowns so scary when there's so much else, I guess, scary? And Broken Life, Shattered Dream, the police say an attack on a Japanese pianist wasn't a hate crime. Social media disagrees. And here is the Sunday Styles cover, Breaking Free of Millie, the successful clothing brand that Michelle Smith built became a crazy carousel she's happy to leave behind. And gay, no, homosexual, straight young men are posting suggestive videos with their buddies on TikTok. And the talk of Montauk, some high-rent tenants in the Hamptons are refusing to pay or leave, invoking state pandemic protections. Last couple of sections here before we bring Amy on. The White Issue, a play on the September issue of Vogue magazine. Has Anna Wintour's diversity push at Vogue and Condé Nast come too late? And I believe there's been some complaints about what's happening at Vogue. And here is the New York Times Magazine, which we'll look at a little later. The All-Seeing Eye. Palantir became a high-tech giant by helping governments and law enforcement decipher vast amounts of data. Is it dangerous to let the software know so much? So that'll be an important issue as well. And I'm just showing this, even though this is an ad. I like looking at this because this is an 8-page freestanding ad in the New York Times by Dropbox Business. And you can just imagine how expensive this would have been to create something like this. And this is talking about businesses that launched in the middle of the pandemic, which reminds me, our own business, Digimentors, has had a amazing year in the middle of all of this, even as the pain is so obvious to so many people. Our work in virtual events has kept us very busy, and we're super grateful for that. And A reminder, if anyone is interested in virtual events, please talk to us. We would love to talk to you. So let's bring on Amy Padnani, an editor on the Obits desk, to say hello and be with us. Hello, Amy.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for your time on a Sunday morning. Are you a Sunday morning person?
Usually I'd be out for a run right now, but
Oh, okay. All right.
after.
But you don't have to be camera ready or anything, so this is different.
Yes, it's a little different. I had to wake up a little earlier than usual today.
One of the ways we start the show is to ask, how are you, where are you, and how's your family been handling the pandemic?
I'm good, thank you. I'm in Washington Heights in my apartment. Thankfully, my family has been really healthy through all of this and staying safe. So, you know.
And you're not having to go into the office, right?
No. I mean, they give us the option, but as of now, they say we don't have to return until July, which is pretty good. So I'm getting comfortable here at home.
I can understand that. Well, one of the things that I wanted to ask you is that the pandemic means that you're trying to cover so many different topics as the Times does. What is it like on the obituaries desk? Because there are so many more obits to write, so many more people. Not everybody obviously qualifies for an obit in the Times, but if you can just give us some sense of what this has added to the overall work that you're doing.
It's been really interesting. It's been a busy year, and I remember in the start of 2020, when we first learned about the pandemic, it was actually eerily quiet. And then all of a sudden we started getting all these emails about people who are dying of COVID. And so we had a chat among our team about whether we should, how to approach these COVID deaths, because a lot of them were everyday people. Like you said, they wouldn't necessarily merit an obituary, but this was a real moment that we wanted to capture. And so we started this series called Those We've Lost. And it's kind of inspired by the Portraits of Grief series we did after 9/11 that wrote sort of mini profiles of all of the people who had died. And so we took that format and we brought it to Those We've Lost, and we've been writing these mini profiles every single day of people who die. But it's so interesting because you can really see a part of yourself in these stories of people that you would not have otherwise heard about. And so it's actually a very meaningful project.
And that makes it, gives it another dimension to the work that you're already doing. And that's so important. So on this show, I should tell everyone, people who've been watching know that I'm very obsessed with obits, and I'm sure you meet people like that. So why don't we take a step back and talk about the obituaries desk? What does it look like? How many folks are on it? And kind of the most basic question, how do people get selected to get a New York Times obit?
Yeah, it's such an interesting world to be a part of. We're a pretty small team, probably not even a dozen people on our actual desk, and yet we write about so many people, every day. I mean, I think the head of the Obits desk, Bill McDonald, I believe once he said there's something like 150,000 people who die from one edition of the newspaper to the next. We probably hear about a couple dozen each day, and between us, we research every single person who comes across us. We carefully examine their contribution to society. We ask each other questions about how this person might have changed the world, or for a group of people, or the world at large. And we make these decisions on who is kind of worthy of a New York Times obituary. And it's kind of a scary position to be in sometimes. You have to really take that responsibility with a good deal of weight. But we try to do our due diligence. So, sometimes people ask me, isn't it depressing to work on the obituaries desk? You're thinking about death all the time. But I actually love my job so much. It helps that one of my colleagues is a stand-up comedian. He makes us laugh a lot. We all sort of push aside the politics, and we really get together, and talk and get along really well. I really enjoy working with my team. And the one thing we say is, in actuality, we're not talking about death all the time. We're talking about the life of the person. And so it's actually a really enriching and meaningful job to have.
No, that's really good to know. So unless this person is a secret stand-up comedian, do you want to give him or her a shout out?
He goes by Peter K for his stand-up, so that's all I'll say.
So I guess he is a secret stand-up comedian. Okay, so we'll let that go. Well, one of the things that we were able to do in recent weeks is we had Neil Genslinger here with us, and he's the one who was talking about your work in the Overlooked series that you created. I think it's one of the things that has brought so much credit to the New York Times. So please tell us what that is and how you got the idea for it and how it got approved and all of that.
Sure, yeah. Neil is a fantastic writer. I really enjoy editing his work. Also, he's a very clean writer, so he doesn't require a heavy edit. But his stories are always so poignant. So I really appreciate him, and I'm glad you had him on because he speaks so beautifully about the work that we do. So with Overlooked, I joined Obits almost 4 years ago now, and we, I was just getting acclimated to the work and the workflow. And I noticed we would get these emails sometimes from readers that would say, why don't you have more women and people of color in your obituaries? And I have to say, I hadn't noticed it myself, but then I couldn't unnotice it. I really thought, wow, we have a lot of white men in our pages. There's probably something we can do here to vary it. And so because I was new to the team, I asked my colleagues, why is it, what do we say to these readers when they write? And the usual response was, obits are a review look at society. They're looking at a person whose heyday was at a time when women and people of color weren't invited to the table to make a difference. And so, in a generation or two, we'll naturally see more people of color and women dying, and they'll be in our pages. There's definitely some truth to that, but I still felt unsatisfied. I just thought, there's got to be a way we can look a little bit harder, perhaps, for these people. They're definitely out there. And so I started on this kind of research project of my own to try and figure out how we can diversify our pages. And all of this was just sort of on my mind when one day I came across a website talking about the history of tennis, and it credited a woman named Mary Outerbridge with introducing tennis to America in the late 1800s. And I thought, wow, one of the biggest sports in America was introduced by a woman. Does anybody know that? And did she get a New York Times obituary? So spoiler alert, she did not. I checked our archives and I decided that maybe this was a good time to tell her story. I came across other interesting names in history of women who never got obituaries. And so I approached my team and I said, well, what do you think if we were to tell their stories now? It was a really bizarre proposition, I have to admit, and I think it was taken that way. We're a daily newspaper. We cover what's happening now. There are plenty of people dying now who need coverage. We don't have the time or resources to really look back in history. And so this idea just sort of sat on the table for a while. And then eventually this really supportive editor whose name you know very well, Monica Drake, I was chatting with her and told her about this idea that was sort of circulating in my mind. And she said, oh my gosh, that idea is brilliant. And so she just started talking to everybody about it. And before long, I got the green light and was able to lift this off the ground. And so that's how Overlook got started. Now we have probably, I'm guessing, 125 or so Overlooked obits that have been published. But in this that you're showing here, this is the first 15 people. And that top one there is Ida B. Wells. She was one of the most remarkable people we came across, and one of the most shocking that we came across who hadn't received an obit. She was such a pioneering journalist. She used these methods of investigative reporting that are still used today, and really made an impact in taking on her campaign against lynching. We also, if you want to keep scrolling, I can tell you about some of the other people we came across. Chu Jin, she was a feminist in China. She was into swords and wine and bomb making. She was, she was a cross-dresser. She was very interesting. And this is who I was talking about earlier. This is Mary Outerbridge, who it turns out she may not have actually been the first to introduce tennis to America, but she was definitely a pioneer of the sport. It was tricky to find out the exact details of who actually introduced tennis so long ago. But because of her, women were involved in the sport early on, and the very first tournament involved women, which was really, really neat. Diane Arbus is a brilliant.
I'm shocked that Diane Arbus didn't get an obit in the Times and all of this. By the way, some great comments already coming here and people saying, thank you, Amy, for making this happen. And I know this is a group effort, right? So you can have the idea, but there's a dedication of resources. So various people on your team and maybe even outside the team need to approve something like this. So
yeah,
that's great.
Just the idea itself came out of so many conversations, as this was plaguing me, and just talking to my colleagues and trying to figure out what we could be doing here differently. Definitely a team effort. Like hundreds of writers have raised their hands to contribute. It's just, it's massive.
And I see here Nicole says, hi, Amy, fond memories of low HUD days. We also had...
Yeah, we worked together. We were interns at the Journal News together.
Yeah, and she now lives in India, which is fantastic. And we had a nice comment from Twyla Duncan, who was saying, congrats to you, Amy, for Overlooked, and thank you, Monica Drake, for championing your idea, which is this wonderful. And Monica has been a 3-time guest on the New York Times Read Along, and we are very grateful to her for being an early participant on this and championing our little show, now 5 years old, which is kind of hard to believe. To you, who was the most surprising? I presume Ida B. Wells would have been one of those folks. Who else was really surprising, didn't get an obit?
Sylvia Plath, for sure, the poet.
Oh my God.
Just, we all read her poetry in school, and I was very familiar with her work, so I was so surprised to learn. And who else? Beatrix Potter. We actually haven't published her Overlooked yet, but we will soon. She wrote The Tale of Peter Rabbit, which was, of course, another book we all grew up reading. Who else? There's so many there. There's Sylvia Plath, Henrietta Lacks. I mean, I guess we couldn't really know her contribution when she was alive, but her cells were used for cancer research, which is so incredibly important. So many people have benefited. Madhubala, the Bollywood actress who died tragically young, she was, in so many movies in her day.
And so when you look back at this, did you try to answer the question, why didn't they get one? Or there was no point trying to figure it out and just focus on the story?
I mean, you can't help but wonder, but, I never really got an answer. It just, the newspaper was structured differently back in the day. We didn't always have an obituaries desk, for starters. So it would have been left to the national desk or, whoever, to those editors to decide. Sometimes these people died in obscurity, and it's clear, that might have been the reason why they never got an obit. I know one of them was Nella Larson. She was a writer, star of the Harlem Renaissance. She wrote 2 books that, again, are read in schools today, but eventually she didn't make that much money from her writing, and she was accused of plagiarism at some point. She gave up writing, went back to nursing, her first career, and just sort of died poor. And so nobody really heard about her at the time of her death. I don't know if there was breaking news on the day that some of these people died, or, and it was just a big news cycle, or if the editor just didn't care, or if it really was, this woman isn't important, or whatever. Also, the obits pages used to be different a long time ago. They were more like society pages. So you would read about the local banker who died, or his wife who threw the parties for, all of his friends and that sort of thing. It wouldn't really be famous people. It would just be like whoever we knew. So many things have changed over time. It's just really tough to say why these people didn't get obits. But with some of them, like
Just want to
IWL,
show, yeah, I just want to show Ada Lovelace, who is now celebrated as the first computer programmer, didn't get an obit. And this is also a year, I guess you're also looking back at 1851 when the Times was launched. So this would have been the very first year. Again, no excuses on any of these, but just kind of thinking about that. But you're also not therefore doing obituaries of Shakespeare or other people who died before the Times existed, correct?
that's right. Technically, we couldn't have overlooked them since we didn't exist ourselves to cover them.
And you were going to say something about Ida?
Yeah, we on the front page when she got married, we had like a little wedding notice about her. So it's kind of funny that we didn't have anything about her death. Like hers is pretty surprising. We covered her a lot. So.
Oh, so interesting. Ariel says, congratulations. So nice to see the history of the important women and people of color. How do you go about researching their lives?
Ariel is a friend of mine. Hi, Ariel. Yeah, the research is really interesting. Ariel knows a little bit about this because she's heard me talk about my work, but it can be really, really difficult to find the information on people who sometimes have died more than 100 years ago. I have a lot of interesting stories about this, but Mary Outerbridge alone, like I said earlier, I couldn't find out for sure whether she was the person who introduced tennis to America. I thought she had been, and there were all these articles in the New York Times itself in the 1930s saying, oh, was it Mary Outerbridge or was it this other guy who is a doctor in Massachusetts who set up a court on his uncle's lawn? And they said they determined, no, it was Mary Outerbridge. They got the passenger list of when she returned from a ship to Bermuda where she was vacationing and saw these British Army officers playing tennis for the first time. She brought back the net and the rackets with her. And so they said she returned, we have the date, we have the passenger list, she returned to America before, he set up his port. It was definitely Mary Outerbridge. Then I called a tennis historian and he said, what, you're saying Mary Outerbridge brought tennis to America? I said, yeah, it was determined in the 1930s. He said, no. There were at least 6 people credited with introducing tennis to America. And the reason was this British Army officer had patented tennis as like a box set, almost like Monopoly as a game you could buy. And they were just selling like hotcakes. So nobody could really tell because it became so popular so fast who actually brought tennis to America. So a lot of these stories come up where you just can't pinpoint all of the facts, but we try really, really hard. There's one in particular, Bessie Stringfield. She was the motorcycle queen of Miami. She roared through the Jim Crow South on her bike, doing tricks and surprising all the kids in the neighborhood. So I assigned this to a Metro reporter named Nikita Stewart, and my phone rings and it's Nikita, and she says, I'm not sure if we can do the obit for Bessie Stringfield. And I said, why? She said, well, she lied. She lied about who her parents were. She lied about where she's from. She lied about her ethnicity. She just, lied about a lot of things. And I said, well, how do you know that? And she said, well, I got her death certificate and she secured all these documents. And I said, so why couldn't we just write the facts then? And she said, well, I was talking with her best friend who's working on a biography of her, and the best friend got really angry. She said, this is how Bessie wanted to be known. And so I said, well, to me, that's really interesting. I think we should write that into the story that, Bessie, for some reason or another, to get ahead in life, felt like she had to lie about her own background. So, maybe we can fit that in. And so she did, and it just, made her seem like a way more complex, like interesting human being that I think a lot of people could relate to in that way.
Sure. Folks, we have gotten almost 100 comments in here already this morning. It tells you how much interest there is in this topic. Please keep posting your questions for Amy, and also share any favorite obits that you have read. And Unikrishna in Bahrain says that I must read the Madhubala story. Madhubala, as we mentioned, was a leading Bollywood star who did not get an obit in the New York Times. Miriam says some of those people were known to selected populations like Plath or Arbus or Wells, I think sometimes the paper was not on the ball, and then the paper thought it was too late. So that could also be an issue now. I mean, I wonder what you and the desk and everyone has learned about the Overlook, from the Overlook section, about today. How has that affected what you're doing? Setting apart the pandemic, like what has changed about the desk because of the lessons of Overlook?
I think about this so much. I think, we really try really hard now when we hear about a woman who dies. We do a lot of careful research and ask people, she knew about her, just to make sure before we dismiss somebody that in fact there's not something we're missing about their contribution. So we're a lot more careful about those sorts of things. And we also, it's true about being on the ball. We have to know who's important. And so to me personally, it's really important. Like anytime I think you have a group of people who are making decisions, you want that group of people to be really diverse. And that includes age. And I happen to be right now one of the youngest people, if not the youngest person on the team. And that's something to think about too, is, it's really useful to have people with various knowledge. You had Neil on the show a couple of weeks ago. He knows a lot about television and theater since he was a critic. So sometimes we'll go to him to ask about that. I'm interested in running. So, if there's a track and field star who dies, I like to contribute and, my viewpoint on that. We have people who are into sports, and so it's just really helpful to have all of that. And age is important too. There's so many people dying young now. A lot of YouTube stars and influencers that, if one of my editors might be familiar with an older generation, but it's important too to know about younger stars who die and whether they're important, and again to be on the ball in a variety of ways. So I'm happy I'm there to contribute on that end.
Oh, that's great. So many more questions. We're going to hold back some of the questions for now so that we can get to the paper itself. But I do want to tell you about my favorite Overlooked. I'm going to put this on the screen here so everybody can see. And this is the story of the Queen of Jhansi, such an important figure in the story of India's struggle for independence. And she's Queen Lakshmi Bai, who is known as the Rani of Jhansi. And Jhansi is a town in northern India. And she did not get an obit in the New York Times, but led the first battle for independence, as it's known in India, in 1857, just 5 years after the New York Times was born. Can you tell me a little bit about this particular story and how this came to be?
Yeah, that one's pretty interesting. There's actually a movie. There's a movie about her, and this writer, Alicia, she reached out to me because her friend was the lead actress in that movie, and she said, "Oh, I don't think we ever wrote an obit on this person." And so I looked her up, and I thought, wow, she's amazing. She was like a warrior. She led an entire army and trained them and everything, and was just like extremely courageous. And so I said, yes, please go ahead and write it. So it's interesting how these stories come to me in so many different ways, and the connections that people might have to a person in history that they want to bring to light now. So that was how I learned about her, and just so remarkable, her story.
And it's so well written. So I recommend everyone check out that particular Overlooked. So let's get to the paper if we can, and talk about the news of the day. And you'll jump in as you have comments or thoughts on anything that you see here. The lead story is Trump's legacy on economy goes beyond numbers. And sometimes on Sundays, the paper has a big kind of takeout story at the top. They don't have one here today. For media folks, this is a very important story about the Epoch Times, how an obscure newspaper that's run by the Falun Gong became a big part of the anti-China movement in the US and a bullhorn for the far right. And here's a story, The Long Run, a frayed bond between Biden and the police amid calls for reform. Old ally seeks trust. He had done a lot of work with police, and So this is a part of a series that's called The Long Run, about each of the candidates as they are running for office and their story. Why Apple and Google set aside a rivalry to rake in billions. And this shows Sundar Pichai and Tim Cook dining together in 2017. And improbably, sports made it back in 2020. Now the hard part. I'm not sure exactly what the hard part they're saying. Is it this? I've not read the story yet, but is it keeping it going, or what happens next? But that's one of the stories here. And many in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, a steel industry town, believe the president has been good for the manufacturing sector and the economy. Feel free to jump in on anything you see or any comments you have. As someone now who does a lot of work in history, I'm sure you're interested in seeing this on this day in history. This is from 2002, so not that long ago, with two held police tie rifle in car to sniper killings. This was a moment that, such an unusual story that terrorized people in the Washington area, and about a man and a boy who were shooting people, sniping people randomly with their rifle, and killed multiple folks. And here is Mr. Rogers and a story about PBS. And so this is inside the Times on that. And Mr. Rogers must have gotten obviously a very good obit in the New York Times.
Yeah, he did. Actually, we had an overlooked on his therapist. She was a psychologist, and he kind of came up with the idea for the show after talking with her. It was a really good one.
Oh, good. Yeah, so people will want to see that for sure. New Yorkers are relieved to be back at the gym. Is it safe? One of the things we saw is a story out from Canada about a gym where 61 people got coronavirus, even though they were extra careful. So you said you're a runner. Do you go to the gym, or have you started going back to the gym?
I went a couple of times. Can you show me who that story was written by?
Sure.
I did go a couple of times. I would say out of like 200 machines, there were only 10 being used. Yes, that's Dan Slotnick. He used to work on the Obituaries desk, and now he's a fellow on Metro. And he told me about this story that he was working on it. So I'm excited to read it later. Glad it finally ran. Yeah, I went back to the gym once or twice, but I didn't really feel that comfortable there. How about you? Have you gone back?
No, I'm not a gym goer in the best of times. So well, I like walking, and but we were out yesterday. My family gave me a surprise advanced birthday party in Central Park. So that was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's so nice.
With masks and everything. So, But one of the things that the president lied about at the debate was that New York is a ghost town and rioting everywhere, and none of that is true, as you know, as someone who lives in New York City as well. And his lies have also contributed to what you're seeing here. This is about the worst outbreaks are now in rural areas, and this president has really accentuated that divide in this country and helped make it worse. Pandemic's toll is closer to 300,000, and hospitals still eerily empty of non-COVID patients. It's like those people have vanished. And here's an unusual ad from Lego. I don't think I've seen a Lego ad in the Times before, but this is from the foundation, I guess. And this isn't just another brick. Were you a Lego person when you were were you a Lego kid?
Oh, who doesn't love Legos? But you know what that makes me think about is, I don't know about you, but I had a hard time getting a hold of a puzzle at the start of the pandemic because they were selling out. I almost wonder if Lego's trying to get in on the home time activities during the pandemic. But yeah.
Here's an ad for the U.S. Postal Service buying a full-page ad in the New York Times to say that we will fulfill our commitments to you. Of course, Louis DeJoy, who caused a lot of the problems, and his boss about the Postal Service, as China clamps down, activists flee Hong Kong for refuge in West, and South Korea lets draft resistors serve their country as prison employees. So, as you may know, South Korea has mandatory military service. So I guess this gentleman, who is a Jehovah's Witness, took a prison job as an alternative to military service. And Patricia says page 13 has a profound ad on Black Lives Matter, and here it is. And so this is an ad. The Architects Foundation's Diversity Advancement Scholarship has put in this ad. And we are undersigned architects and design professionals in solidarity with NOMA, the National Organization of Minority Architects. So interesting. And I guess some of these would be famous architects and up-and-coming architects and people. Again, one of the points that Miriam Berkeley made, that people are known in their own fields more sometimes than obviously in the broader community. Resign, rewrite, reform. What's driving Thailand's protests? And suicide attack at tutor center kills at least 18 in Afghanistan. For Israel, warmer ties with Sudan may be symbolic progress at best. And Polish president tests positive for virus. And he is one of several world leaders that have been somewhat skeptical of the virus. And the CEO, the founder of Samsung, or the chairman of Samsung, dies. So here's the obit. So this is an obit that's not in the obit section. So can you tell us about that? This kind of a breaking news obit. I wonder, is this more like a news story, or is this a full obit? You may not even know.
That one was published overnight, I think, by our Hong Kong office. I don't know how it came to be, since I was asleep and I joined your show as soon as I woke up. But
yeah,
but yeah, I don't think we had that one prepared, but I could be wrong.
And is there a difference between a kind of breaking news story about someone who dies and an obit, and how do you decide who gets what?
Yeah, I mean, I think Neil talked about this before, but we have something like 2,000 advance obituaries prepared for people who have not yet died. Some people consider this to be a little creepy, but for us, it's extremely important. We can't, these days with journalism, it's so immediate, you can't be behind by even a minute. And so it's really helpful to have these advances written. The only thing you need to plug in are the details, a confirmation from somebody to say how they died, when they died, the fact that they are dead, because we've been caught before. I don't know if you've ever heard of Alan Abel. He's a professional prankster, and once he's known for this campaign that animals should wear underwear. He said a nude horse is a rude horse, and he also pranked the New York Times once about his death. He had his wife call crying, that saying he was dead. He had all these telephones set up at fake funeral homes to confirm everything. We ran his obituary. This is years ago. And then the next day he had a news conference to say, haha, I'm not dead. I caught you. And so he died only last year, I think. And we were like, are you sure? Maybe we want some harder evidence. Can we see his body? And so you can see that headline. We were kind of playing with that whole incident. We said hoaxer extraordinaire is on good authority dead at 94. That was
Did you basically rerun like 90% of the obit?
No, this was all brand new, beautifully written. This was an advance obit written by Margaret Fox. She was a senior obituaries writer, one of the best we've ever had. But we did, if you scroll down, there's like a clipping of the first obit that we ran. Their obituary disclosed as hoax.
Yeah, that's a correction you never want to run, right?
No.
Yeah.
So we always have to get confirmation from somebody saying this person has indeed passed away. And
of course, in his case, he probably wanted to say that reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. And I mean, that is a quote attributed to Mark Twain. But these days, I don't know if it was, you can't tell the quotes online. So how do you verify all these things that you put into the obits?
It's I mean, it's not easy either. I think, Neil talked about corrections. We never want to run a correction, but these obits are like a minefield because there's so many facts. We're just really careful to check everything over preferably, the reporter would call a family member and go over all of the details of the person's life. But even then, sometimes the family member's memory is a little fuzzy. So, so we just have to be really careful, do a little research of our own, Google every little pronoun, and make sure it's all correct.
Yeah, here's an unusual obit. Emma Gatewood, the first woman to conquer the trail alone.
This is my all-time favorite overlooked obit. I highly recommend it. It was written by Kit Seeley, this was written by Kit Seeley before she joined the Obituaries desk, and I'm so glad we have her on our team now. So Grandma Gatewood, as she was known, she survived 30 years of domestic violence at the hands of her husband. And one day he beat her so badly, he broke a broomstick over her head, and she threw a sack of flour at him. And when the police arrived, they arrested her, not him. And so the mayor of the town saw her in jail and said, come to my home and rest up and recover. And when she did, she divorced her husband. And she read this article about how no woman had ever hiked the Appalachian Trail in its entirety alone. Now, when her husband used to abuse her, she would escape by taking walks in the woods. And so for her, this was, not a strange environment. She decided she was going to do it. And the first time she went out, she broke her glasses. She got lost. The park ranger said, "Lady, go home." But she came back and she did it again. And she was 67 years old. A great grandmother at that point. When the news reporters all learned about her trek, they came to the finish and they said, "How did you survive so rough a place?" But they had no idea what she had survived before that. In fact, nobody did until I think it was her grandnephew, decided he wanted to write a book about her Appalachian Trail accomplishment and found her diary and read about all of the abuse that she had faced. So it's a really remarkable, powerful story about, just overcoming and strength and achievements. And it's just beautiful.
The Obits page from today's paper and the print New York Times edition that I get, it varies from section to, from different editions. And then we'll look at some more of the comments that have been coming in. So folks, please tell us where you're watching from. Please ask your questions of Amy. Tell us about some of the obits you remember reading that you want other people to read. And if you are joining us for the very first time, this is the Sunday New York Times Read Along. For 5 years, we've been reading the New York Times out loud on Sunday mornings. It started as an experiment to learn how to use Facebook Live, and then it's grown into a wonderful community of people around the world. Big shout out to our team of producers that makes this possible, including Neil Parekh and Paula Kiger, Steve Taylor, Carla Baranakis, Julia Weeks. They work so hard to make this experience so special. And we're live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And one of the ways we are able to do this is because of this amazing team. And whenever people tell me how great the read along is, it's because of these producers. And this has also become the basis of the work we do as a company at Digimentors. We do dozens of virtual events every month. And we've been doing them. We've done events for 50 people and 100,000 people. And all of that is possible because of the lessons we've learned here at the Read Along, bringing in these comments, putting in the annotations, all of that. And thank you, Ron. Ron is one of our sponsors as well. He lives in Dubai and has been a guest on this show. So we're always looking for guest ideas for speakers to join us. So please let us know. We're also looking for sponsors so we can pay our team for this great work that they do. And please be in touch. And you can find our entire archive on my YouTube channel. I don't think we go all the way back, but you can find me on Facebook. But on our YouTube channel, we have a playlist just on the New York Times Read Along. And a reminder, if I can just let you know that we have, out of this grew our daily spin-off show about COVID-19 that airs every single day, including tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern. Would love to have you all join us. We have a very unusual show. We do positivity on Sunday nights, despite all the rotten things going on. And our guest is the venerable Tenzin Priyadarshi, the founding director of the Dalai Lama Center for Ethics and Transformative Values at MIT, a center dedicated to inquiry, dialogue, and education on the ethical and humane dimensions of life. His website is imonk.org, and he was born into a Hindu family in India, and then at the age of 10 became a monk. On his own, he voluntarily became a monk, became Buddhist, and became a monk, and became one of the disciples of the Dalai Lama. And we'll talk about his experiences with the Dalai Lama and so much more. 9 p.m. Eastern, please join us for that. And so let's go to today's obit pages, or I guess just one page in my section here, and have Amy talk to us and tell us about this. She may or may not have worked on either of these particular obits, but she'll have some thoughts on it for sure. And then on this side are the paid obituaries.
Yeah, I actually did edit the top one on James A. Johnson, and that was written by Kit Seeley. He did a lot in his life. It was actually probably a big challenge to pack it all in. He ran Fannie Mae, the Kennedy Center, the Brookings Institution. He aided many Democrats in their presidential and vice presidential campaigns. Yeah, he was a pretty big deal. It was a tricky obit because he was also accused of some wrongdoing at Fannie Mae. He ran the company before the subprime mortgage crisis, but some people said he still contributed to it through his practices. And so, we had to find the right balance when we were putting this story together to capture all of that, the full being. I mean, obits are not always meant to be, they're not really a tribute, we say, to a person. It's really writing about their entire life. So that's something we had to keep in mind there.
Yeah, one of the things that you pointed out was that sometimes mistakes come in, and that's because family members either misremember or want to maybe embellish things to make their loved one look better, right? So how do you counter that? It must be so difficult, especially when you want to be respectful of the family members.
Yeah, it's really a challenge to talk to a family member as they're grieving. I mean, I think you just let them talk. You listen as much as you can, and let them say everything that they want to say, and then just keep asking the important questions. We also talk to other people besides the family member, people who may not be grieving quite so much in that moment, experts, authors on that topic, professors who are knowledgeable about the issue. So, I think that tells a more complete story about a person.
Thank you. And Robert DeMora, 85, designer of outlandish costumes, died. And you can see this memorable costume for Nathan Lane in The Birdcage. And here is Bette Midler's body mermaid character, Dolores Delago. And he made this costume as well. When you look at this, this page, I mean, you just had room for 2 of these, and these are the people who happened to die, who qualified for a New York Times obit. Do you sometimes worry that, oh, here we have 2 men again, 2 white men on this? Or do you look at over a week, that's where we want the diversity rather than a single issue?
It's both, for sure. I mean, we're constantly thinking about how to diversify, but on every single page, we'd like to have a good balance of gender and race when we can, but sometimes we don't have it available to us. Other times, fitting stuff on the page is a whole nother story. Each morning we request how much space we would like. I'm sure readers have noticed that the obituaries jump around in the page. They're not always in the exact same section. And so we request how much space do we want a second page in addition to the original one that we get, or even a third page, depending on how many obits we have on our budget that day. Sometimes we like to request color if we have like an artist and beautiful photos to go with it, but we don't always get what we ask for. So other times we have to work with the space that we're given, and therefore, like if we have an obit on a woman, but it's extremely long, we may not be able to fit it on that one page with another obit, and so we have to make all these decisions kind of on the fly each day.
I can understand that. I'm looking here. I'm showing you the paid obits. Do you ever read these to see, are there people we should be considering for a regular obit?
Yeah, occasionally we do, and we'll even read some of them in other newspapers. One of the best obits I've ever read was also written by Margalit Fox, the writer I mentioned earlier. It was on Frances Gabe, the inventor of the world's only self-cleaning house. She's the daughter of a builder, so he taught her a lot about construction. And as she grew older and learned that, in our society, women are responsible for household chores like cleaning, she said, "Who wants to clean? It's a nerve-twangling bore." And so she put her skills to use, and she built a self-cleaning house. There were like sprinkler systems throughout. There were dryers. The closet was a dual like washing machine. You just put the clothes in the closet and they all clean. Same for her cupboard. Yeah, if you scroll down a bit there, you'll see her in her home with her umbrella as the house is getting cleaned. She was really interesting too, because she was kind of a curmudgeon. She also liked to garden in the nude, and her neighbors were not fans of her, probably for that reason. And she also kept this cement truck in her yard. So I think the neighbors, were not a big fan, but I'm sure they were very envious of her self-cleaning house.
If you get, I know there'll be people watching here who over time have felt that they wish their loved one got an obit in the Times. Can you give us some tips for people who may want to reach out and they believe they have a good case? So if you can kind of outline what that case should be and what are some ways in which, within reason, they can try and reach out to make a case to you or to the team.
Yeah, sure. We have an email address, obits@nytimes.com. And usually it's just really helpful to have a lot of details about the person's life, the basic facts, but also most importantly, probably, what was that person's sort of claim to fame? What was it that the person accomplished that, that you feel like changed the way of life for a group of people or the world? What sort of difference do they make that readers might care about? Obits are about people, but they're also news stories. So readers have to want to read them. There has to be some kind of newsy element or something interesting, maybe a window into a time in history, for instance. So just I would say make that case in those notes so that it helps us in our research as we look at all these people.
Thank you. Folks, we're talking to Amy Padnani, an editor on the Obituaries desk of the New York Times. We have about 30 minutes or so with her. Please share this with your friends and family. Tag them right now, and then they can watch this later. Please hit retweet. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and on LinkedIn. There's so much great information we're getting from Amy, and we're also learning about the news and what's going on there. She now gets to pick where we go. We've left the first section, so she can take a look at the screen here and decide where she wants to go next.
Is Sunday Business there? Yeah, let's take a look at Sunday Business. I used to work in our business desk some years back, and I loved this section.
And here you're seeing kind of a revolt, a mini revolt at Condé Nast, I guess is the story. I don't know if you've read this yet, but Edmund Lee is a terrific media reporter at the New York Times, and his story is about diversity issues at Vogue. Of course, we have a friend who is part of Condé Nast now, the editor-in-chief of Vanity Fair, Radhika Jones, and has brought great diversity at Condé Nast and to Vanity Fair. But the question being asked here is it a little too late? And if you have any insights on any of these stories, please jump in, Amy.
Well, Radhika used to work at the Times, so I remember her. But yeah, I saw that one on Twitter yesterday, but I haven't dug in yet.
Turning facial recognition tools against the police. And I wonder about this. So here's that story. And then here is the story about Palantir and, data and things like that. Do reporters even know when these kinds of stories are running in, like, on the covers of different sections?
They might. I mean, you can attend the meetings every day when we talk about all of these top stories.
and so they try to coordinate if they can. Or will they put pointers from one story to another online at least?
Yeah, occasionally. The magazine is kind of its own world, so it's a little bit trickier, but you can always reach out to somebody and make your plea to promote another story.
It could all come down to Pennsylvania. How does the Times, which famously doesn't do cartoons or comics, decide when to use these kinds of illustrations or graphic novel type treatment in different departments?
I have to say we're getting a lot more creative with our ways of telling stories. I know you had Veronica Chambers on a few weeks back, and she's the lead editor on narrative storytelling. She does some incredibly creative work, hiring artists to draw things. She had an original playwright do an original play on suffrage. Just really remarkable stuff. But I think also our graphics team is incredibly skilled. They're not just artists. They're reporters. They're researchers. They're like a full one-stop shop there. So they do really remarkable work.
Priya says, such a fan of all you do, Amy. I really love the global reach of Times Obits. Can you share how the desk approaches obits for folks who die and are prominent outside the US? Okay, that's a great question. Before you come to that, let me just, I just want to finish up this Vogue story here. We'd say that's Vogue or that's not Vogue. And what that really meant was thin, rich, and white is a great pull-out quote here. And I think it's important when you see a print section like this, right, where the display of the photographs is all tied into the story. And you can see how much space that takes up, but it adds to the value of the print section when you're seeing a story like this.
Yeah.
So do you want to answer that question, please?
Sure. Yeah. So I know Priya. Hi, Priya. You know, it's tough. We try to have our feelers in all different areas. And one thing I did when I first joined Obits was I emailed every single foreign correspondent and said, can you please let us know if you hear of anybody important in your world who dies, musician, a scholar, you know, just a politician, anybody who you think is worthy of an obituary. It would be really helpful. And so there are sort of eyes and ears around the world. They don't always remember us, but I'm really glad when they do. Recently, we had an obit on a Nepalese mountain climber. He climbs Everest without oxygen multiple times, and that is a rare feat. Like once you reach a certain elevation, it's just so hard to breathe and your body starts to break down if you don't carry bottled oxygen. But he actually never felt that need for any oxygen. And so he climbed on his own. And we learned about that from our India bureau. Jeffrey Gettleman is the bureau chief there who alerted us and had a writer in India write that for us. So that was extremely helpful. And of course, I would welcome anybody here to keep in touch with us. Let us know if you know of any international figures who die. We're definitely trying to reach out to more parts of the world.
Thank you. And folks, if you're joining us right now, this is Amy Padnani, and she is an editor on the Obits desk. And she also helped create Overlooked, the amazing series that so many people love all over the world, because you started writing about women and people of color whose influence was not recognized by the Times at the time. And so they've gone back and written obits of people who died, including Ada Lovelace, who died in 1852, just 1 year after the New York Times was born. And so that is just amazing. This is the person you were just telling us about, earned the nickname Snow Leopard for his agility. He climbed the world's highest mountain 10 times without supplemental oxygen between 83 and 96. And that's a great story. We've got lots of comments and other things still coming in, so please keep those posts coming. And we hope Amy will have time later to go into Facebook and maybe reply to some of the comments. Sure. as well. So Amy, let's look at the rest of the paper. Where would you like to go next? You can see this display here.
How about real estate? I've been very interested in how the trends are going in New York.
And that's the cover story created just for you. So now you can read this. And it says, when the smoke clears, key stakeholders weigh in on how the pandemic could change New York's housing markets. And 1 in 5 New York City tenants did not pay rent in September by one estimate. And there's growing concern of an eviction tsunami. What a story that is. And have you found that the housing market, have you seen rents fall? That's what I've been hearing.
Yes, big time. I think this is such an opportunity if you're looking to move or make a change or invest. This is the time to look to buy a place or move to a neighborhood that you previously could not afford. Perhaps that's something I'm thinking about personally. So I've been paying a lot of attention to that.
And here is an example of how the Times has changed over the years. Look at this nice headline. The train was so packed, those were the days. Sigh is what this Rhonda Kaysen piece is about.
That's a really funny illustration.
Yeah, and that's true, right? The Times doesn't do illustrations that often. As you said, they're getting more creative. And here is an illustration by Tricia Kraus. And also, could you see yourself living in another part of the country or outside of Manhattan or outside New York City?
It's tough. I was born in New York, so it's. I think people born in New York always feel the pull back even after they leave. But it would be nice, actually, just in this time when we're all working remotely. This is time to get a change of scenery. You were talking about going out to the park. It's so important to be surrounded by an area where you're happy. And winter is coming, so in New York, we're all going to be hunkered down when it's cold. So I would think about it. I don't know. I wonder what others are doing in this time, if they're taking advantage.
Look at this. Neil is maybe tempting fate here. He says, question for Amy, who's your favorite obit writer? He may be fishing. He may be tempting fate.
Is this one of those questions like a parent has to say who their favorite child is? I know. I've already sung your praises, Neil. And Margot's. I guess I have to sing everybody's praises.
This would be a long show if you have to do that. Wayne Kamadoy, who is an amazing designer at the Times, who has not yet had a chance to be in the show, but has been part of the show because so many people talk about him. He says, Amy is a friend of print for the Print Hub, working with art directors on projects like Overlooked and Past Tense that have had special sections in the paper.
Oh yeah, Wayne is fantastic to work with. Friend of print. He's been a good friend to me too, and Fred Bierman too. A lot of the talented designers on the team. Andrew Sondern did the design for both Overlooked print sections when we had special sections for those. So yeah, such talent on that team. I really appreciate working with them.
I see a comment there from Stefan Kaplan, our friend and colleague at the at Digimentors, who was a New York Times photo editor for 20 years. Overlooked is one of the most important additions to the New York Times in years. And I think he's a big admirer of what you've done as well. And I see that Carla Baranakis, one of our teammates here on this show, says she has a question for Neil Genslinger. What about Sid Hartman? Sid, she's asking him a question, so that's interesting. And lots of other great comments coming in here as well. One thing that I was curious, Amy, that we should give you kudos for the amazing section you helped put together on the 30th anniversary of the ADA. So that was a change of pace for you. So can you talk about that? The Americans with Disabilities Act. We featured it when it ran here on the New York Times Read Along, and then we did a whole separate episode with 6 members of the disabled community, and you joined us for my daily COVID-19 show.
Yeah, I don't know which episode number that was, but I would encourage everybody to go back and watch it. That was probably one of the most fun and interesting conversations I've had in a long time. So I kind of fell into this project by accident, and I dragged Neil into it. He contributed to it as well. So originally I was, when Overlooked launched, I heard from an opinion editor named Peter Catapano. He runs a column called Disability, and those are essays about disability written by people with disabilities. And he does such good work. And he wrote to me and he said, people with disabilities among the overlooked. This group of people is especially overlooked. And I met with him for coffee and I said, well, what if we partnered up on a special edition of Overlooked, looking at really important figures to the disability rights movement. And when we went back to Monica Drake, her name comes up again, she's in charge of special projects now. And we pitched this idea to her. She said, I just think this is, she said, what's the news hook? And we said, well, the 30th anniversary of the passage of ADA is coming up. And she said, I just think this is a much bigger story, a bigger opportunity. You know, why don't we go throughout the entire newsroom and look at the issue of disability in a variety of areas and topics beyond just history? And so, I became the lead editor on that project. We looked at culture. There you have, this is a really nice piece. This Crip Hop Nation looks at artists with disabilities, and we had a music writer beautifully describe the work that they do and the impact. We did several overlooked obits. We had these profiles here. This is Judy Heumann. She's like one of the most important figures in the disability rights movement. We did a little write-up from her. This is one of the overlooked obits on Brad Lomax, who was with the Black Panthers, and was also, that's Judy Heumann next to him in the photograph there. They were part of the 504 sit-in, which was an occupation of a government building in San Francisco. For almost a month, they sat there demanding their rights. And here's the overlook that Neil wrote on Cheryl Wade. She was an actress who just, this was her way of dealing with her disability, was to just put it right out there. And Neil did a beautiful job with that. I like, you know, there are moments, they say a really good obit is one where you can laugh and you can cry. And with Cheryl, I did both. So that was a great job. See, Neil, I'm singing your praises again.
We'll show the comment that he said about Amy 2 weeks ago. This is Neil Parekh talking about Neil Genslinger, who was a guest on our show. Neil Genslinger called Amy a breath of fresh air and wicked smart. I'm trying to do the Boston accent there. I'm not sure why, but that was badly done. I also wanted to just mention that the episode you were on was episode 141, 30 years of the ADA of my New York Times read-along. Today is episode number 229. So that shows you how much time has already passed during the pandemic, that it's been, you know, almost 100 days since we did that episode, and how quickly I have the feeling that during the pandemic, time is flying really fast and really slow. How has it been affecting you?
I can't help but feel the exact same way. You know, it's almost election day, which is crazy to think. And yet I was trying to remember something that happened a week ago, and it felt like it was a month ago. So it's this bizarre moment where you can't really capture each day, but you have to try not to let them all blend in. You know, we're all still here trying to live our lives and find some sanity. And, you know, one secret I learned early on from my running coach was routine. Find a routine that makes you happy. And for me, it was going out for a run. Sometimes I wouldn't even leave the house if it wasn't for going out for a run. So I do that almost every single morning. And it, you know, gives me some fresh air. I get to experience the outdoors, see some people, and it's good. It's grounding.
Before we move on, I see a cat post behind you.
Oh, my cat died in March. Yeah, let me see. There's the. I use it for storage now. You can see like the pile of stuff, but and that's why it's out of view on purpose. Yeah, unfortunately, she died in March at the very start of all of this, and I miss her a lot. This is not really a great time to be on your own. So I know a lot of people have adopted pets during the pandemic.
Did you consider a pandemic kitty?
I think it's a little too soon for me.
So. And what did you write a little family obit for her?
No, I didn't. No, but that's a good idea. You know, it's not too late. I don't want her to be overlooked. I'll never forget her. But that reminds me of something that I think is really important that I'd like to share with your viewers, which is I've been telling people whenever I can that they should really write about themselves, write about your own life, your own story, your own legacy, somewhere, anywhere, a letter to somebody, a journal, something. I just think it's so incredibly important. Particularly, I think women and people of color don't think to do this. Immigrants, you just come to America, you blend in, you work hard. I don't think people really think about their contribution to the world, but however big or small, you just never know 100 years from now who's going to be looking to learn something about you or something that you may have done that affected somebody that, sparks their curiosity. And so I'm just encouraging people to write about themselves. It can be in the form of an obit if you choose or not, but just somewhere, somebody will be looking for you someday.
Thank you. Let's look at some of the comments. Carla says, I'm so sorry about your cat. And Paula says, yes, it's so true and so hard to do. Write about yourself. Norman says he wrote obits for the Seattle Times. Rajan is watching from Long Island. And then Debbie says, we went to Meow's Cat Cafe last week to pet cats. And that it was very sweet to do that. And by the way, she also thanked you because she says that the ADA has been so important to people who have young adult children, and because of the what the ADA has been able to do, the act to make life and society more accommodating, and so that's so important. So thank you, Debbie, for that comment as well. And Norm says family members were always eager to share memories of those they loved when he was at the Seattle Times. Do you find, Amy, that other newspapers take obits as seriously? Do other countries take obits as seriously as the Times does?
When I first joined Obits, I became really curious about just the format of an obituary and how it's done elsewhere, and read a couple of books about it. There's one called The Deadbeat, which is very entertaining, talks a lot about newspapers in the US largely. But what I learned was the obits were largely a phenomenon from the UK. So a lot of British newspapers will have obituaries, but it's not as common in the United States to find dedicated obituary sections. There are a handful of newspapers, of course. The Washington Post does a great job. The LA Times will occasionally have obits, but I don't believe they have an obituaries desk. So there are a number of other places too. But what fascinates me is just that from day one, September 18th, 1851, when the New York Times began publishing, we had an obit. And I wonder, what did we, why? Like, what did we realize about society's sort of fascination with death? We knew it was important, obviously, and it still is to this day, but it's really interesting to me why people are drawn to obits. You yourself have said you're really interested in obits. Have you ever thought about why that is?
I think it's partly because it's an amazing way to learn. You reading like a biography, a mini biography, without having to go through all that other effort. But also the range of stories. Like every day, I read the obits carefully, and I'll find little nuggets that then, like sometimes I'll share them on social, and I sometimes call these kind of instant classic obits because they're just so worth reading. And Shahana says, I find the obituaries are the most positive section I read in a newspaper, always about the good side of people and interesting lives. So great to see that. Haydar is watching from Holland. And Paula has put in a link to The Deadbeat, the book that you mentioned. And Chatachi is watching from Fort Lauderdale, a former guest on the show. And Rajan makes an important point here that I would recommend the Times think about in term, and maybe you've already thought about this. He's talking about how his uncle in 95 was a prominent writer and academic in Indonesia and Australia, but there weren't sufficient objective sources in English to warrant his having an NYT obituary. And that's one of the questions or observations I wanted to kind of ask you about. The Wikipedia standard of, having third-party news references. How much have you studied of that and used in your own kind of notability understanding of what makes it notable enough to be a New York Times obit?
Yeah, definitely. I use those sources a lot to try and learn more about a person. That was really interesting, that point about about languages and the language barrier. This has been coming up more and more lately. You know, we have a lot of figures in different parts of the world who die, and we're really fascinated by them, but we don't have a French speaker or a Spanish speaker on our Obits staff, and so, or, you know, any other language. So it makes it really difficult. But I don't know if you've heard this before, but we have an internal tool at the Times. We call it Babel, and in it, there's a listing, a directory of every single staffer and the languages that they may speak. So that's become really useful to us in opening up our world a little, so that we can contact other staffers around the Times and make use of their ability to understand a different language. So that's one way we've been trying to get around that issue, but it does happen a lot.
All right, we have just a few minutes left with Amy. We want to do a reminder of my show tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in. We have the Venerable Tenzin Priyadarshi for Positivity Night, and we want to tell you what's coming up next Sunday at 8:30 a.m. on the New York Times Read Along. It's the last Sunday before the elections, and we couldn't think of a better guest than Jim Roberts. He's the former longtime New York Times editor, the former editor-in-chief of Cheddar, and the publisher and chief strategy officer at the 74. And he is one of the best follows on the internet. You must check him out on Twitter and see all the great work that he shares every single day. I love following him, so I'm just glad that he'll be with us next week. And do follow him. And that's at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. He's NYC Jim on Twitter. When he left the New York Times, he used to be NYT Jim. He just became NYC Jim. And I don't know, Amy, if you ever had a chance to work with Jim Roberts.
When I got hired in 2011, he was one of the people I interviewed with. So he's partially responsible for me having a job at the time. So.
Terrific. So please tell everybody about his being on the show next Sunday. So let's get to the magazine. We love talking about the New York Times Magazine, and we're going to show you how the cover comes together in this video that the Times puts on. The cover is about Palantir, a website, that company that is controversial for what it's been doing in terms of working with government as well as with law enforcement. Have you had a chance to look at this week's magazine yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay. All right, so let's play the video and then we'll come back for your thoughts as well.
From the New York Times Magazine, this is Behind the Cover. Our cover story this week by Michael Steinberger is about Palantir, a tech company.
We could hear Neil. That was sounding great. It was all good. Let's see if we can bring that back. While he's setting that up again, we will.
From the New York Times Magazine, this is Behind the Cover. Our cover story this week by Michael Steinberger is about Palantir, a tech company that went public earlier this year. Palantir helps governments and law enforcement decipher vast amounts of data. They've worked with ICE to track undocumented immigrants and aided the World Food Program in distributing supplies during the pandemic. Antoine Degata photographed Alex Karp, the co-founder and CEO of the company, but we pursued a typographic direction for the cover. We reached out to Nikita Iziev, a London-based designer who does motion graphics with typography. We wanted him to play with what felt like a lot of data, but also ultimately organize it into a headline, The All-Seeing Eye. We thought it looked quite beautiful, but also ominous, which seemed to relate to some of the concerns that people have about Palantir in terms of how its technology is being used. The question is whether the immediate benefit of Palantir's technology outweighs the fact that we know so little about how it'll be used in the future. Should we trust software that can see and do anything?
As you can see. So
It's really cool.
Amy, so tell me about what you think of the magazine, and do you find time to read it? I think it's an extraordinary publication.
Yeah, that is a really cool story about the cover. Yeah, I at least try to read the cover story when I'm able to. It's so important, such relevant work that is done. But yeah, I haven't read that one quite yet. I'll have to go back after the show.
Here's a quote. It says, "I have seen Evita at least 6 times." There's a New York Times, there's a NYT without context Twitter feed that I used to read. I don't know if it still exists, where they just take random sentences out of the New York Times, and that would be one of them, right? Someone who's read Evita who's seen Evita so many times. Here's the poem in the New York Times. We don't often get time to read it, but I'm about to read it because it's short. And one of my rules, Amy, is that poetry should be read by the poets themselves or experts on the poet. But in honor of all the poets that were overlooked and then you were able to bring back attention to, I will read this poem and butcher a lot of it. Good Deeds by Rachel Eliza Griffiths. Then think of every song of love hurled at you and yours. Recall how battered you were by sheer understanding so that you might surrender. Not her being gone, but everything else. The world insists you return. You go along with the house rules, what the passage of sunlight means, a warmth that is bold enough to burn the world alive. I say I can't remember how to be the same. I say I can't pretend to be that woman, the world, or the love song you left behind your eyes. I say that I am beginning to understand the way my friends sing alone inside of walls. Do you have time to read poetry, Amy?
Occasionally, I really do enjoy it. You can see my messy bookshelf back there. I have a few books of poetry, but it's been a long time since I have picked one up.
Here is Studies Show. I guess, I don't know if this is a new section, but it's called Studies Show. What a fishing voyage and other real-life experiments can tell us about COVID-19 in the absence of randomized controlled trials. So much in the paper, in the paper to read, but also in the magazine. I don't know what this is. A letter of recommendation. Rocking in bed. That sweet music, rhythmic me time. My parents never thought it was as worrisome or something that needed fixing. You were such a cute Martian in there, my mother said to me once. I'm not sure. This is some things that sometimes in the Times you have to really read to understand what the heck they're talking about.
Right. It just occurred to me that I recently worked on a project that involves some poetry. It was called the Mrs. Files. It's another sort of history-focused project. I worked on it with Veronica Chambers, and we explored the meaning behind the honorific Mrs. and what it means to women. In part, it was inspired by these files that we found in our morgue, in our archives, that would identify women by their husbands' names. So like Mrs. Diego Rivera for Frida Kahlo, that was an example. And so we had 3 poets contribute and tell us what Mrs. means to them and what marriage means to them. And those were just brilliant. There's one, Miss Monroe. Helen Moore just wrote a poem all about Marilyn Monroe. And then we had Denise Frohman. She's a brilliant spoken word poet. She wrote Lady Jordan. That's probably my favorite one of all of these, talking about her childhood on the basketball court. It was just really brilliant. The other one was by Sarah Kay. Also highly recommends reading these. They're short, and just we also had them, we actually, going along with what you were saying before, we had them read their poems, and we included an audio file so you can hear their voices reading it.
That's great. I will just point out that on my Twitter bio, it says here very clearly that I am Mr. Rupa Online. That's my wife, Rupa, and happy anniversary, 21 years, my dear. And I'm very proud to be known as Mr. at Rupa Online.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And then I think this is in honor of you being with us. The New York Times says, how to scatter cremated remains. So if you're going to talk to someone from the Obits section, do you put those kinds of descriptions in the obituaries? Have you seen unusual ways in which people are doing their remains and things like that?
Very rarely, only if it's really central to the story or pertinent in some way, but usually we don't mention information about a funeral or cremation or anything like that. But we have come across some interesting stories, interesting traditions. There was somebody, it wasn't done on the Obits desk. I can't recall which desk did it, and the name of the person, but there was a person who was terminally ill, knew they were about to die, and decided to hold their funeral in the days before they died because they wanted to be there with all of their family members and loved ones. So, and there was a really interesting story done on that. We've thought about it before, more than just obits, we are kind of like the death desk, and we've thought about, what other sort of creative things that we can do, but we haven't stretched our wings quite yet to figure that out.
And I'm looking here at a Julia Child approved lunch. This tuna salad sandwich was the comfort food the famous cookbook author craved. So that's interesting because she was famous for all these complicated French recipes, but here she was liking just a simple tuna salad sandwich. Are you a cook?
Tomatoes, huh?
Yeah, that's right. Are you?
Yeah, I love to cook, actually. I mean, during the pandemic especially, I've been cooking so much and trying new things. I'm more of a baker. I actually briefly had a stand at a farmer's market once on Staten Island, and I would sell my baked goods there. So my theme was everything pumpkin. It was called, Oh My Gourd, Pumpkin Treats.
Oh, look at this. Speaking of food, this is a profile of Gagan Anand, whose restaurant in Bangkok was considered the world's #1 Indian restaurant, if not the #1 restaurant in the world. It became a pilgrimage site for globe hopping foodies. So why, even before the pandemic hit, was he willing to give it up? The Fed Up Chef by Sheila Marakar, who I know is a fabulous writer. And photograph, you can't make this name up. Look at this. Amanda Mustard writes about one of the world's most famous chefs. And I've not read the story yet, but I can't wait to see it. You can see he's quite a character. The meal costs Amy, as Indian yourself, I'm sure your family would be as shocked as mine to know an Indian meal that costs $400.
Oh yeah, I don't think we'll be going there. My dad knows where to find some good bargains when it comes to tasty Indian food.
Rajan says, "Oh my gourd is excellent," as a name for your business. Let's see here, and I guess this is a lot of South Asianness going on today. Kamala, my mother, and me. Many progressive mistrust Kamala Harris for her past as a prosecutor. As an ex-convict and the son of a crime victim, I can tell you it's not that simple. Reginald Dwayne Betts. What an unusual story here.
I'll definitely be reading that. That looks
yeah.
really good. I've been so interested in Kamala Harris's background and how it shaped her.
Are you a puzzler?
I try to do the crossword every now and then. I've been into the spelling bee game from the New York Times. I don't know if you've tried that one.
Here it is. Yeah, I've not quite figured out what it is and how to. There's just too many things going on with these puzzles. So have you you're able to do them?
Yeah, I've reached at least the genius level. You have to incorporate the middle letter in formulating words of 4 letters or more.
Nice.
And there is a word that uses all of those. I actually know the word. I think it's countdown. I can see it. That uses every single letter, and they call it a panagram. So.
Oh, nice. This is like a kind of Boggle, a version of Boggle, I guess, or Yahtzee. I can't even remember those childhood games.
Right.
And look at this. I've never seen this before. The BNY Mellon Bank Company has a crossword puzzle ad that they put in the New York Times. Wow. And I guess it's on the back as well. So they got the back cover and the inside back cover, but what an unusual ad.
I don't think I'll be getting to that one.
Yeah. But okay, so let's bring Neil back because we won't have time to finish up the paper here. But let's also see any other comments that have come in. And we talked a lot about Neil G. That's Neil Genslinger, who was a guest a couple of weeks ago. But here's Neil Parekh, our executive producer.
Thanks. Thanks, Shri. Appreciate it, Amy. It was great to have you on the show today. Definitely very interesting, and certainly, as Shri has mentioned, we are big fans of the Obits. So great to get that background and that perspective. And I think it says a lot that Neil was watching the show today. I don't think he was checking up on you. He's watched several of our shows, but I know he's a big fan from my conversation with him and his comments on last week's show. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. And before I forget, Overlooked has just landed a book deal, and so there'll be an announcement pretty soon. There'll be 3 books: an adult compilation, a middle grade book, and a children's picture book. So a lot of people have asked me, will there be a book that they can buy for their friends? And yes, in 2022, there will be one available.
And that's breaking news, right, Amy?
Yeah, that's new. That we just learned this recently.
Yeah.
Yay,
Well,
that's exciting.
Thank you.
Congratulations, and thank you for sharing that with us. In addition to a book deal, Overlooked is also coming to TV, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we it'll be on Netflix. Higher Ground Production is behind it. That's the Obama's company, and there are a few episodes already written that I've read through, and yeah, I'll be executive producing that show. I'm really excited to work with the writers.
Wow.
The showrunner is Lauren Morelli, who worked on Orange is the New Black, which I think was a brilliant show. So I hope she brings that same thought and energy to this.
That's incredible. What a way to give the importance to the Overlooked series. I mean, not just the special emphasis and to keep finding additional obits to do, but to give it the TV treatment. That's a huge commitment from the New York Times.
Yeah, it should be fun. It's they're being really creative and doing it more of a dramatization of each woman's life rather than cradle to grave sort of documentary. So I hope people will enjoy it. I don't know when they'll go back into production, with the pandemic and California not looking so good at the moment, but hopefully soon.
What did they say roughly when it was supposed to be airing?
Yeah. No, no clue. I know that most of the episodes are written, but I think there's still a lot of tweaking to do and casting and whatever other stuff happens when you put together a TV show. This is my foray, so I'm not that.
An idea? Are these going to be like short vignettes or like half-hour episodes of each obit?
I believe they're going to be about a half hour, each one.
Wow.
Taking a moment in a woman's life and trying to spin a tale out of it. So I know a couple of them already. Emily Warren Roebling, who helped finish building the Brooklyn Bridge when her husband became ill, and Mickey Gorman, who was immigrant from Japan who won the New York City Marathon and went on to break several records in running. So I actually wrote her Overlooked obit, and I know she'll be featured in the show too. So I'm really excited for that.
That's great. Great. Well, congratulations again.
Thanks.
And thank you so much for joining us.
Oh,
Shri, I do have one thing I'd like to share with our audience. And Amy, if you have time, if you could stay with us. I know it's 10:15. But as folks know, Shri has been doing the New York Times read-along for 5 years now. I was thrilled to start watching it about 4 years ago and start helping as just randomly. I started dropping in links to articles while Shri was talking, thinking it would be helpful. That's the role that Paula is playing now, and then I started bugging Shri because I never knew until Sunday morning came around whether or not it would actually go live. There was no promotion, no advance warning. Sometimes it would happen, sometimes it won't. Shri thought it was such a great idea, he told me to handle the marketing for the show. So that's how I got roped in. But I thought it'd be fun to go back into the Wayback Machine for folks who've been watching us more recently. And I want to make sure I got the right. I'm not sharing this with the audio, but this is the very first New York Times read-along, October 24th. What's the date? 2015. So just 5 years ago. And Shri, if I'm doing my math right, so that was a Sunday that day, I guess. That was your anniversary, right?
Yeah, so this is how I spent my anniversary, so don't remind my wife about that. But thank you for finding this. So this was October 24th. I'm actually reading the Saturday. As you know, Amy and others know that in New York,
Saturday home delivery, yeah.
They deliver the giant stack on Saturday because you can't get through it on Sunday. And so this is the view of the Hudson River. So that was featured early. This was a much shorter edition. I didn't have this amazing team with me, but here was that big Christo project. You remember the floating project that he did on a lake in in Italy that was going on then, and so many other stories. I was looking at the real estate. You can see I cared about that then also, and I went back and looked at it. And this is a time when you didn't spend every single minute thinking about the president and the presidency, but FBI chief links eyes on police to rise in crime, sharp dispute over any credence to the Ferguson effect, and Michael Schmidt, who is one of your colleagues, and with Matt Apuzzo, and Michael was a guest on our show talking about his big book about the presidency. Right. So this is all Neil is kind of scrubbing through the day,
show highlights, right?
Yeah, and I didn't start, obviously, since this is in the middle of the episode, I didn't start with the front page. I didn't know what I was doing. Facebook Live was also new, so we were playing with this. 3 directors say Volkswagen hit deceit from the board. And this was the presidential campaign had started full swing, because June 15th or so was roughly when candidate Trump came down the escalator. But that's not every single story on the front page isn't about Donald Trump or the election yet, as it will come to be, and as it has been for the remainder of the last 5 years. Just so grateful to Amy for being with us here today. Grateful for our amazing team, and so grateful to our audience. We've really built a family here, and I'm very grateful to everyone. 5 years of the New York Times read along, and it wouldn't be possible without our guests who read with us. We mentioned Monica Drake multiple times, but she has been someone who's read with us. Neil, tell us about some of the other colleagues of Amy's who've been with us, including another Amy who runs another section.
We've had a number of great colleagues from the Times. Amy Vership, the editor of the travel section, which obviously has gone through a huge transformation in terms of the home section as of late because of COVID-19. But back in January, Amy Vership had me at her house the day that the 2020 places to go list, the 52 places to go, was in the print edition. And she, as we were planning, she said, well, yeah, I could also have a neighbor come by if you'd like, Seb Modak, who was the 2019 places to go traveler. So that was an epic show just to have them. Tom Jolly had us at his house last year around his kitchen table, the print editor, of course, in the New York Times, and then returned this year on Father's Day, which was great. And we just had a number of great guests from the Times, both in terms of editors, reporters, former editors, but also someone like Claudio Cabrera, who works on search engine optimization off platform on social media. So it's been really great. And then Shri, you had that incredible tour. I was so jealous of that you got to go to the printing plant at College Point and just do a show on a Thursday night from there. That was incredible.
I still have.
Amy, have you been on the tour?
No, I haven't. I'll have to go. I will say I did throw my name in the ring for the 52 Places Traveler the first time around when they got something like 10,000 applications and Monica Drake was in charge of travel. I definitely had to at least try. So, but
do you know what they're doing this year? Did they suspend the program, or what?
I'm pretty sure they suspended it. Yeah, and probably for good reason, especially with the way things are now.
Yeah. But I think when travel comes back, people are going to be paying even more attention to the travel section of the New York Times. There are some elements of it in the At Home and in other parts of the paper for sure. So with that, we want to bring this episode to an end. We have a great episode coming up next Sunday. Let's remind everybody, Jim Roberts, who is partly responsible for, as Amy said, for Amy's gig at the New York Times. He will be here next Sunday. Fabulous editor at the Times, editor-in-chief of Cheddar, the former editor-in-chief of Cheddar. And I will learn what the 74 is. And he's a publisher and chief strategy officer. And he's NYC Jim after being NYT Jim in the New York Times. So we're going to continue celebrating the 5-year anniversary for several weeks.
An important note, next week is daylight savings time comes to an end. So we'll be moving our clocks back, but we won't move the New York Times read along back to 7:30. That would be a little too early for folks.
Yeah.
cruel and unusual maybe, but for folks overseas, it'll be 1:30 p.m. GMT and 7 p.m. IST in terms of India Standard Time. So please take note of that. And of course, one of the reminders with this with the calendar turning and November coming up, make sure you vote. Early voting is opened in New York and elsewhere. Vote by uh, the best advice really that people have been giving, even if you've applied for an absentee ballot, as Pam and I have done, drop your ballot off if you can in a drop box in a officially sanctioned elections
Not a
board
fake one.
drop
Yeah.
box,
Yeah.
not a fake one as the Republicans. It's getting political, but this is factual news. The Republican Party in California set up drop boxes to collect ballots, and they were admonished for that by
And
the Attorney
it's
General.
illegal, of course.
And
And we also just want to say that one of the spin-off shows that have come from the work that Neil and I have done for the last many years is the COVID show that I do every day. But we also have another fabulous show that will run right after this at 11 a.m. Eastern. It's called She's on Call. Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Dr. Marina Kurian will be hosting this important show about COVID and so much more. And they have 3 guests who will be with them, including an expert on the eye, 2 experts on the eye, and a pediatric anesthesiologist. So this will be today at 11 a.m. Eastern. Please check out She's on Call. Please follow them. Very proud of this show on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube. So please join them at 11 a.m. Eastern right after in about half an hour.
And we shouldn't leave. First of all, Nicole is thankful for the New York Times read along being overseas and missing the print edition, and a number of anniversary messages came in as well, Shri. So we should acknowledge that again, and to thank you to Rupa as well. This is one of the things that we try and remember to thank our partners and our spouses and our families for putting up with this.
You can't believe the disruption this is on a Sunday morning to families.
Every Sunday morning, Pam. Okay, I'll watch Emily. I'm up at 6 o'clock in the morning, 6:30 every Sunday. She's watching Emily, and then I check in around 10:30, 11 o'clock when we're done. But Ellen wishes you a happy anniversary. Of course, our friend Ron. Neil Genslinger is opening a bottle of champagne in your honor.
I should be flattered, but he probably likes opening bottles of champagne anyway.
And Nicole is also wishing
Dashera, which is a big Indian holiday, a big
right?
Hindu holiday, which is going on today.
Yeah.
And so thank you, Amy, for your patience through all of this and your good humor and for so many great insights. Can you remind everyone of the email address where people can pitch obits global obits that should be at least considered?
Sure. It's obits at nytimes.com, OBITS. And thank you so much for having me, and congratulations on 5 years. Also, I want to say happy anniversary. I really appreciate it. It was great to chat with you today.
Thank you. And of course, no promises made with that email address, but certainly do send those comments in if you have someone in your world who should be considered by the Times. And please follow Amy. She's NYT Amy on Twitter. So please do follow her. And Deb says, Mazel Tov on your double anniversary. I should also point out that we were going to gather our entire team for an epic read along in person, because it was also my 50th birthday coming up. So we figured we'd do a really big celebration and do all of that. We're not able to, but this is a great substitute to have Amy Padnani with us on this day. So thank you very much, Amy, again. And I will say goodbye. I know, Neil, you have to do some admin thank yous and things, so you'll do that, and I'll take off, and I have to go produce She's on Call, so I'm going to go do that with our team. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Shri. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
So, of course, with the read along, we also want to thank one more time our sponsors. Of course, Muckrack. There's a fundamentals of social media course that Shri has been able to work on with them. It's a free on-demand certification course. Several people have taken it. Several, 1,000 people, if I'm not mistaken. You can enroll today at mrac.co/social. And then we also want to recognize Strategy Focus Group for their support of the New York Times Read Along. Strategy Focus Group is a global team of human capital strategists committed to helping organizations solve people issues within your organization. They do that by working alongside you to solve your toughest problems and helping you capture your greatest opportunities. And of course, as Shri was mentioning, next week's guest is Jim Roberts. Thank you again, in particular, to our fabulous New York Times Read Along production team. Paula Kiger, you can follow her at Big Green Pen. Steve Taylor at Steve DeReeve. Julia Weeks at Julia L. Weeks. And Carla Baranakis at Kabara. And of course, Carla is the one that's responsible for putting us in touch with Jim Roberts for next week. And as we mentioned, Carla, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University, which brings you the Local Connection newsletter every week. Each week, it offers story ideas and pro tips for journalists, and it's free. You can subscribe at bit.ly/local news tips, bit.ly/local news tips. Carla, of course, puts out the Local Connection every week. So thank you again for joining us. This was a great show with Amy Padnani. And as soon as the show finishes, in case you joined us halfway through, I believe Neil Genslinger mentioned that he joined us halfway. You can watch right from the beginning as soon as it's done on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and YouTube. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week. Let me just check real quick. Some great comments came in afterward. Happy anniversaries and Ellen. So let's take a moment and take the comments because we always end and then people say their thank yous as we're leaving. Let's see, Ellen, Austin, what a lovely lady and great show. Absolutely. My mom wishing Shri a double anniversary of the New York Times Read Along and his wedding anniversary. Patricia as well, and others saying bye bye. So thank you again, and we will see you next week, November 1st. Don't forget to vote. Bye bye.